To be there. Which leads me to our next speaker. Andrew Hundley is the Executive Director and co-founder of the Louisiana Parole Project, a nonprofit organization dedicated to providing advocacy and reentry support for incarcerated individuals who are deserving of a second chance. Andrew's journey is one of remarkable transformation. Once labeled as a juvenile lifer, he became the first person in Louisiana to be paroled under the U.S. Supreme Court Miller v. Alabama and Montgomery v. Louisiana decisions, which recognize the unconstitutionality of mandatory life sentence for juveniles. Since his release in June 2016, Andrew has embraced many roles: husband, father, college graduate, and committed advocate. Just 2 months after his parole, he co-founded the Louisiana Parole Project to walk alongside others seeking redemption and successful reentry into society. Please give a warm welcome to Andrew Hundley.
Thank you very much. Try to be loud. All right. Wonderful. Thank you. When I was 15 years old, I committed a horrible crime, and I was justly convicted of that crime and sent to prison. As a child, going to prison is no less scary than it is as an adult. And it was very hard to see what my future would look like at that time. It was a very dark time, a lot of uncertainty because of the love of my family, though I was sustained. There were many people who did not give up on me, and fortunately some things changed in my life, because obviously I'm here standing before you today. This is a photo of me in 2015. I'm not a cowboy, but I played one in prison. The last job I had at Louisiana State Penitentiary at Angola was I worked on the range crew. If you aren't aware, there are 2,000 head of cattle plus at Louisiana State Penitentiary, from one end of the farm to the other, and the range crew takes care of the beef cattle operation there. And it was a wonderful job. There are some times I even missed that job. I learned a lot of lessons. When I was on that horse, this particular day, I remember it. Oftentimes people ask me, why do I have two horses? Long story. But I had no idea that in about a year, I would be coming home. Many of you may be familiar with this next photo. If you haven't seen Shawshank Redemption, you must not watch much television or movies. But in prison, one of the nicknames that I got was Andy Dufresne. Most people who met me in prison called me Andy, all right? And for them, it was short for Andy Dufresne. I spent 19 years in prison before I received my second chance. Andy Dufresne spent 19 years in prison before he made his own second chance. Now, we had a couple different ways of coming out of prison, but there were a couple similarities. And one of the ways that I really empathize and understand the character of Andy Dufresne is he made some amazing friends. He met some great people in prison who were there for doing horrible things, people who were better than their worst moment, like Red. And when Andy came home, he didn't forget about Red. And he'd left Red a note instructions, how to find him if he ever gets there. And sorry for those of you who haven't seen the movie, but those of you who've seen it know it. In the end, Red finds Andy on a beach, and you assume that there's a good life ahead of both of them. That's who I was when I left prison after 19 years. A very grateful young man. That was 9+ years ago. And I'd like to think I'm still a young man. But at 34 years old, I came home with my life ahead of me, having this amazing second chance. But walking out of Angola that day, I had a heavy heart. It was as if I had survivor's remorse. Why me? Why am I leaving behind all these people who are no less deserving than me of a second chance? And thus the idea behind Louisiana Parole Project was born. First, I'd like to give you a snapshot of Louisiana's prisons. There are about 29,000 state prisoners. These are people who've been convicted of their crimes, not someone who was picked up last week and just charged that hasn't gone through the criminal justice process. 29,000 state prisoners. Less than half of those are in state prisons. This is just a fact. I'm not trying to go on make some kind of political statement, but half in Louisiana, less than half of state prisoners are at state prisons. So most of the jails that you visit, the institutions that you visit, are state prisons. More than half of state prisoners are in local facilities. And those are generally detention centers that are operated by sheriffs. They're not necessarily housed in the parish where they've been convicted. In fact, in East Baton Rouge, most of the state prisoners who are convicted but remaining in a local facility end up being housed in a detention center in North Louisiana. Okay? So that's where the space is. What I will tell you is, from the perspective of someone who has been in prison, people would rather be in a state prison than a local facility, because the state prisons have more opportunities. They have opportunities to participate in programs like Colby. There are more educational programs. There are mental health services. Local facilities are more lockups, what would be described as 3 hops and a cot. Do your time and then come home. In Louisiana here, the sentence lengths, about 45% of people are doing sentences of 10 years or less. 20%, 11 to 20 years, another 20%, 21+ years. 14% are doing life sentences. Most life sentences in Louisiana are life without parole. You may think, well, Andrew, you had a life sentence, you came home after 19 years. Most people who have life sentences in Louisiana will not come home. Current age, 8% of state prisoners are 24 and younger. 42% are 25 to 39, 40% are 40 to 59, and 1 in 10 state prisoners are 60 or older. You may look at the statistic and think, Andrew, does that mean we thought young people committed crime or old people committing crimes? Nope, young people are committing crime. Most crimes committed by 17 to 25-year-olds. Crime's a young man's game. We keep people locked up a long time. So this is who they are today. The ones who are much older, that just means they've been in prison for quite a while. As it relates to recidivism, that's the rate in which people will return to prison. And this is, as of last year, this was as of 2017 releases. Their 5-year recidivism rates were studied. About 40% returned to prison within 5 years. That's compared to about 45% several years before. The reason I point that out is we have incrementally dropped recidivism in Louisiana over the last several years. This isn't because of one specific administration, one specific politician. We're all just getting smarter. The Department of Corrections, the legislature, reentry providers, we're all getting smarter about doing the best, implementing best practices, learning from our mistakes. It's incremental. We can do better, obviously. So I showed you the graphic earlier about who's in state prisons and who's in local facilities to lead up to this. 40% is the overall number. 35% of people coming home from a state prison recidivate within 5 years. 43% of people who come from local facilities recidivate. You're more likely to go back to prison if you're housed at a local facility. There are a lot of considerations that go into who's housed locally, who's housed at state, but it's not the individual prisoner's, fault. Most of them would like to be in a state facility. To make the point that there are more opportunities at state prisons. There are good people there providing good services, more opportunities, great thing. Also include the statistic, 22% of parole releases recidivate. Well, that's a good number because 40% of the overall population. I think most people would consider or assume the more time you do, the less likely you are to go back to prison. If you get a 30-year sentence, if you do those entire 30 years, wouldn't you be less likely to go back to prison rather than if we paroled you after 15? The answer is no. And there are a lot of reasons for that, one of them being the parole board can add extra conditions. The parole board is very smart about who they do parole and they don't parole. But doing more time doesn't necessarily mean better outcomes. So the criminal justice system is an iceberg, and most people see the top half, just like with any iceberg. Whenever a crime happens, this is what the public knows. A crime's committed, an arrest is made, a person's prosecuted, and then they're sent to prison. We see it in the local paper. And once that person's been sentenced, we forget about them, as if they don't exist anymore. They're the Department of Corrections problem. Society's safer, we can move on, right? Except there's a cycle, there's a new crime committed, there's another person being arrested, tried, convicted, sent to prison. I think what many of you, because of your volunteerism and activity with Colby, know, there's much more to that iceberg. And that's sort of the world that I have been invested in since my release from prison. And some of you who are professionals and spend a lot of time with this know. What's under the surface, first and foremost, is prison life. Going to prison never made someone a better person on its own, okay? Prison will change you. I'm not the same person I was, obviously, when I went to prison. I know the formerly incarcerated people in here can tell you the same thing. Some of us came out better people. There are people who went to prison, there are young people who went to prison that came out better criminals, okay? Prison on its own does not solve anything. It's what happens in prison. And I should say I'm a firm believer in that prisons aren't necessarily places to fix people, okay? They're inherently violent places, they're inherently complicated places, and they're very tough places to work at. People who work within prisons have thankless jobs. There is a culture there that is hard to break through. Do you have the opportunity to rehabilitate yourself? Is something given to you? Are you at a state prison or are you at a local facility? When you're at a state prison, are you going to be given the opportunities to go through certain programs? Or are you going to get involved in sort of the seedy underbelly of the prison and live in disciplinary cell blocks? Are you going to learn new skills? There are a lot of new skills to learn in prison, okay? There are young people who go to prison as burglars, and they learn new skills when they're in prison. They aren't all good, okay? You gain a new network, all right? We send people to prison, and we think we're going to send all the bad people to one place, get them out of society. And we don't think about they're all together in one place, telling stories, sharing lessons. Oh, but guess what? What's also good is where Andrew Hundley, what did I find when I went to prison, were other young people who went to prison with life sentences who changed their lives before I got there so they could show me a path to success. So my network, I was lucky enough to find an amazing network of people. I could have easily gone and sit at another table that first day at Chow Hall and been with another network. There's a preparation for release, whether someone has family support, outside support, they've gotten educated, not. There is this process when you're nearing release, you're preparing for release. And then finally, there is the release back into the community. Will that 2, 5, 10, 20 years that you spent in prison, did that fix you? Did that help you? Thus was born Louisiana Parole Project. After coming home, as I said, I had a heavy heart, wanted to reach back. Wish I could tell you it was all altruistic. I had a heavy heart, and I wanted to figure out a way to help some of my friends get out of prison. And something I knew was not present was a lot of resources for people when they came home from prison. I was lucky that my family could afford to hire an attorney for me. I was lucky that my family had resources for me to be successful. I had a place to live that I did not look like I just got out of prison. I could go to college and no one would ask, did you just get out of prison? You shouldn't be here. So we founded the Louisiana Parole Project, this abstract idea. I did not do it alone, I was a co-founder. An abstract idea that we wanted to find deserving people who would change their lives in prison and give them opportunities to be successful when they came home. It was an abstract idea. What it's grown into today, I wish I could tell you it's exactly like we drew it up. But it's manifested itself in an amazing way. We practice peer-mentored community reentry, which means we are formerly incarcerated people who are sharing our experiences. We're the good guys who came out of prison. We're the good mentors, and we're there to show people when they come home how to live their life the right way. This idea, when we first introduced it, DOC had a little bit of heartburn because the idea was felons should not associate with other felons. Okay? There's so many people who are convicted felons today, it's impossible to enforce that. So what we said was, let good role models, let good people associate with other good people. We're evidence-driven. We didn't just make this stuff up. We researched it. I was lucky I was studying criminology in college while we were building this program, so I was able to dive deep into peer-reviewed articles. So we could not make something up, but actually follow some other models that have been successful. Today, more than 625 clients served. Less than 3% of our clients have returned to prison. More importantly, we judge our success not by the failures, but by the impact that our clients are having in their communities when they're coming home. Our mission is around public safety. We enhance public safety through advocacy programming and services for incarcerated and formerly incarcerated men and women so they can reach their full potential. We envision a justice system that believes in rehabilitation, restoration, and redemption. I usually show this photo anytime I give a talk, mostly because I weighed about 10 pounds less when this photo was taken. But also because this is what reentry looks like. For those of you who've been to Angola or are from St. Francisville, this is the Circle K on Highway 61, not far from the Angola Road. It's a stop we make every time we pick up a client from Angola. From the moment they're coming home, every opportunity is an opportunity to learn. This is Wilbert. He had came home after serving 40 plus years in prison. He had never used a credit card. He had never paid for gas at a pump. He obviously had never used a phone, but no access to technology while he was incarcerated. Thank you. And he's looking at the gas pump as if it's a foreign thing. This is something we all take for granted. Our kids will learn this from watching us, pay for gas. I'm not worried about Wilbert coming home and committing crimes. I'm worried about Wilbert coming home and being able to fit into his community. That's what we do. I like to show this photo because this was a day where 4 of these clients came home on one singular day. They all were released on the same day. And it was such a happy moment. And I show this photo because I'd love to tell you all 4 of these men are doing great in life. They're all doing wonderful. None of them have gone back to prison, but they've had struggles. One of them passed away a couple years after his release from cancer. One of them has struggled with homelessness and addiction. One's doing excellent. One's getting by. He's not back in any kind of trouble. He doesn't have substance abuse issues. He's getting by. But these individuals did not need to be in prison. All of them had served at least 30 years in prison, and it was not serving the public. We were no safer as a public because they were still there in prison. So what does the evidence tell us? What does Parole Project aim to do? Evidence tells us peer mentorship reduces recidivism. This isn't just in reentry. In Alcoholics Anonymous, do people who have never touched a drop of alcohol in their life serve as sponsors for alcoholics? No. Alcoholics in recovery serve as sponsors for other alcoholics. Troops coming home struggling with PTSD, other people with their lived experience serve as mentors. It's very clear in any area lived experience is a plus, but that on its own does not move mountains. We have to provide standard services. So we have peer mentors who are helping them open up bank accounts. We have peer mentors who are helping them get health insurance and sign up for their primary care appointment, who are taking them shopping and teaching them how to be consumers. Early intervention. Our program does not operate on the idea, call us if you need help. Try to do it on your own. No, we start working with people before they're released from prison, start preparing them months before they're going to come home. We pick them up at the front gate. We don't say, go home, party, get it out your system, and come back on Monday. We get you the day you're released. Even if you have family support, you're going to start with us, and then we're going to wean you back to your family, because these are relationships they have to relearn also. Many times when they went to prison, their families were living in poverty, and in 2 decades, their family didn't magically escape poverty. And if they go right back to that same area, they're going to just be compounding their family struggle. So we operate a residential reentry program where they live with us upon release. We have peer pressure against criminal activity, not just peer pressure on how not to get in trouble. We focus on social navigation and self-efficacy. Small tasks like, are you confident that you can park in a parking garage, know how to pay that ticket when you leave? Things that sound elementary to everyone, but people who've been incarcerated for a long time or were never really civic-minded, law-abiding citizens before they went to prison, it's small things. How to be a good consumer. You see, support civic engagement. We want our clients to register to vote. We want them to be worried about those tax elections and those millages that no one ever else worries about. I guarantee you the recidivism rate for someone who votes in a millage election is nil. That's the kind of people we want our clients to be. We want them to volunteer with their local beautification projects. We don't want them to be shut-ins. Our 3 keys to reducing recidivism: safe, stable housing, stable employment, and strong social bonds. Once again, those social bonds, we want them to be active in their communities. Most people who come home from prison are more afraid of you than you are of them. They assume that no one wants to see them get out of prison. They have a scarlet A on their chest, and if you see them out in public, you're going to ridicule them. So they'd rather just, most of them, would rather just stay away. We want them to fight against that urge. We want them to be active in their local faith communities. We want them to join an AA group. We want them to join a civic project. Because if you go to something 3, 4, 5 times and you stop showing up, someone's going to call and ask where you are. We want our clients to have accountability in their life, so someone's going to call them and check on them when they stop showing up. So once again, I noted, before release, we're going in, we're meeting with clients, we're developing a specific plan for them based on their past, based on if they have some, issues with addictions, based on if they need continued mental health support when they release from prison. We work with their families to understand their needs when they release from prison. There's a lot of focus initially, that first month that they're home. It's intensive reintegration. Our job when someone comes home isn't to get them a job on their second or third day home. We need to detox them from prison, and we need to help them understand how to have life skills, how to have good communication skills, how to understand social norms, so they can fit in once they get a job. And I need to make sure they get that doctor's appointment. If they need to get in driving school, let's check all the boxes so when you get a job, you're not asking your employer to take off of work because you have a dental appointment. We have many reentry courses we offer those first 30 days that they're home, from avoiding scams, financial management, healthcare navigation, social work groups, peer support classes that are taught by formerly incarcerated people, like overcoming stigma, having self-discipline, how to navigate relationships within your own family from the perspective of someone who's formerly incarcerated, who's been in their shoes. And we provide a lot of services, case management services, opening up a bank account if they need driving school, in helping them with job seeking skills, connecting them to jobs. What we're very proud of is our housing program. Obviously, we started this organization 9 years ago. There's no course at Angola about how to start or run a nonprofit organization. Learned that as we went. We were a very humble organization when we first started, no big donations. Usually donors would say, well, who's given to you? Well, no one. Well, come back to me when someone else is given to you. But we were fortunate that we received a grant to buy our first 3, after renting apartments, we received a grant to buy our first 3 transitional houses. And then we were able to then be sustainable, raise funds. We own and operate 10 transitional houses and 32 post-transitional properties. Those transitional houses are when people first come home, their first several months home, and then if they don't have a long place residence to go to eventually, then they move into the transitional housing. The idea isn't that they're going to live with us forever. It's not a handout, but a hand up, with an idea that they're going to live with us, work towards self-sustainability, and they're going to go out and want to get their own place. People are generally ambitious. I don't know anyone who's come home from prison that says, please just give me a place to stay forever. There may be some elderly people who just don't have anywhere else to go because they've outlived their family. But people generally want to get their own place and get their own vehicle, and depending on their age, their skills, how much they're able to earn is how fast they can do that. People aren't in a cookie cutter mold, so it's based on that individual's needs. We don't have a specific time criteria. You're in the program as long as you need to be in there, but not a day longer. And we work with them to save money to meet their goals and work towards those long-term goals that people generally have when they come home from prison. Several new programs we've started in the last couple of years. One in particular I want to mention are the Frederick Douglass Project visits. We go into 4 Louisiana prisons now and bring people who've never been to prison. We're not looking to bring people who are, pro-criminal justice reform. We're not looking to necessarily bring crime victim groups to change their minds. We're looking to bring people in who've never had a reason to visit a prison, because we want people to understand what prisons are like. If people understand what goes on in prisons, they're more likely to be supportive. If it's an employer who's more likely to employ someone who's formerly incarcerated, a landlord who's willing to overlook a criminal background if someone applies to live in their space. And we want, citizens to hold legislators and elected officials accountable about what happens in prison. We should all expect that prisons are operated in a way that when people come home, they're prepared to come back into society. Because we're all impacted in a positive way when people come back into our communities and they're ready. And that starts in prison. As far as our engagement with stakeholders, our organization is a collaborator with the Department of Corrections. We're not an adversary. We receive funding, some of our funding, from the Louisiana Department of Corrections. We're proud of that. They believe in what we do. We make their job easier. We bring, like Colby, we're bringing in hope into the prisons, and we're helping to make sure people don't go back into prisons. Successful reentry obviously impacts all of us. Most people who go to prison will come home someday. More than 90% of people will get out of prison someday. Those returning are our neighbors. We interact with them each day. If you think that people who are coming home from prison don't live in your neighborhood, they do. Okay? If you think, what does someone who's been to prison look like? Right here. Investments on the front end equal not having to spend as much on our criminal justice system in the back end. And look, those of you who are here, I get it. I know most of you, if not all of you, are going to agree with these statements. Our work is not just to help people get out of prison, not just to make sure that they don't go back to prison, but they have a good quality of life when they come home, and they can live the kind of life they deserve to live. But people need opportunities. And something I will say about myself is I was given so many opportunities. From the time I was sent to prison with a life sentence, I was allowed to take part in programming, even though I was told I was never go home. I was given an opportunity to be a leader in prison that prepared me whenever I was told I would have an opportunity to go home. I was prepared. What trains you to be the executive director of the Louisiana Parole Project? So much of my training happened in prison. Warden Simon talked about the good guys and the bad guys. I was usually a good guy. I would fight a lot in prison whenever I was young. And I learned interpersonal skills from some of those fights. I learned I can't just fight every time that I have a disagreement with someone. Sometimes we have to talk things through. The Angola rodeo, where I was actively involved in organizing, was probably the most stressful project management that I've ever been involved with. I have never been as stressed a day in my life running this nonprofit organization as I was helping put on that rodeo. So all these opportunities that I was given prepared me for this day. People often told me yes, and I heard no very seldomly. I came home from prison, I want to go to LSU. Yes, LSU let me in. I got my undergrad degree, okay, I want to go to Loyola, I want to get my master's degree. Yes. Right. Individuals who we asked to serve on our board of directors, donors we asked to support us, wardens and corrections officials we asked to go into the prisons to do our work. Yes. Oftentimes people will look at me and think that I'm an exception to the rule, but I'm an example of what happens when people get opportunities and when people hear it. Yes. So I want you to lead, and I say that because I want you to be inspired by the lives you're touching today. The last slide that I have up is just a few names of individuals that I met while I was in prison. Keith Nordyke, Robert Lancaster, Jerry Chidester and Jay Jackson, if anyone's from St. George, you know Jerry and Jay. Father Ron Matthews was the priest at David Wade Correctional Center in the 90s that gave me the sacrament of confirmation, in spite of me having just been thrown away and told I would die in prison. Father Bernie Papania is in Mississippi now, but he was our priest at Angola for so many years and offered me so many life lessons. I did not know Mary Ann Girolando would be in the audience today. Wave your hand. Where are you? Okay. I did not know you would be here today, so I didn't put your name on here just because I knew you'd be here. And Danny Hoover. These are just a few of the individuals. These are people that you may or may not know that I met in prison, that came into prison for one reason or another, whether it was to bring in the Catholic faith, whether it was a retired criminal justice professor visiting young people in prison, whether it was an LSU law professor that took the time to get to know me while he was visiting some of his clients. These people had an impact on me from visiting me in prison, right? And continued to enrich my life since I've come home from prison. And they're friends and they're colleagues. They're people who I've had meaningful relationships with. That being said, know this, the impact that you're making on the lives that you're touching inside of prisons are real. Those individuals are hearing yes from you. They're hearing that their life is worthwhile, and they're more likely to come home and be successful because of the work that you're doing. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to tell you my story about the work of Louisiana Parole Project, and thank you for all you're doing through Colby Ministries.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Do we have any questions?
Andrew, thank you for speaking at length about the temporal needs and material needs. I've been doing prison ministry for 10 years in several states, and the biggest fear of most of the guys as they approach that time is, how do I re-enter, and what's the world going to, how are they going to accept me? So, great work. I do have one question, or I'd like you to speak about their spiritual needs afterward. I didn't see too much of that. And are there advocates in the local diocese around the state? How are you approaching that? Can you speak a little bit about that?
Sure. So, because we're a nonprofit organization, obviously, because of our 501c3, we're very careful of how we present as an organization. I think most of the members of Louisiana Parole Project's board of directors belong to parishes in the Baton Rouge diocese. Much of our staff are Catholic. Many of our clients who come home are Catholic. I can tell you we encourage our clients to join a faith community when they come home. And whenever someone says, well, I didn't do the church thing whenever I was in prison, we tell them, find a place, go. Show up 3 weeks in a row, someone's going to invite you to lunch. They're going to ask about you. They're going to find out you're not employed. They're going to tell you about their brother-in-law who's looking for part-time work. So that we encourage it in that way. We've been very fortunate to have a lot of faith organizations, and our work is centered in the Baton Rouge community. We have a lot of local faiths, even outside of the Catholic faith, who welcome our clients in their doors whenever they do come home from prison. So we do encourage our clients, for those who are less motivated because they haven't had a faith journey while they were incarcerated, we try to be, as I said, strategic about how we encourage them to join a faith community. And I'm sorry, the second part of your question? Yeah, we have considerable amount of support from the parishes of the Baton Rouge Diocese. You know, there's one parish, all we have to say is, hey, we need deodorant, soap, and toothpaste, and a few days later, we have a year's worth of supplies. We have mentors who come in because, look, we have our staff are mostly formerly incarcerated people, but we can't do it on our own, and we depend on volunteers who come in and talk about financial management, areas where they have subject matter expertise. You know, the model of our program is, let's give people a bridge so they don't go from prison right into the deep end of the pond. And we recognize people just need that short-term help. And when I say short-term, sometimes it's a few months, sometimes it's a year. But when people have that kind of stability, they can work towards long-term success and sustainability.
Thank you. Thank you for what you've done. Thank you for what you're doing. There are, I think, others like me in this group who are interested in finding where the Lord is calling us to help. So I assume you have paid staff and need material, goods, and contributions, as you mentioned. But where are your needs in terms of people to help and in terms of volunteers?
Sure. So for Parole Project, we do have a website, paroleproject.org, that you could visit, and that gives you some different options. You know, from finding donated, we accept donated clothes, donated furnishings. When we have a client who's gets their first apartment, they've saved enough money, they're going to go out on their own, they're going to buy their first apartment. They've saved up enough money for their first month rent, their deposit. Now they have an empty apartment. You know, people don't think about all the little things you need. So donations of furnishings, household goods, pots, pans, silverware, things that you think, like, that people normally don't think about. It helps so much defraying the cost for them to have to build out their apartment. So in addition to financial donations and donations of physical things, you know, we're always searching for mentors, people who are willing to come to our office and teach a class, someone who's willing to come have coffee with clients and have a conversation with them, because people are going to model the behavior that they see. We want people, you know, oftentimes we have volunteers who will come out, let's say take some of our female clients out to lunch, bring them to lunch, get to know them, help them see their worth. You're not going to have someone that's going to turn into someone asking you to pay their light bill. But human touch is so important. And so many people who are coming home from prison don't have good role models in their life. So having people that are willing to come out and teach those classes or be mentors are vitally important. And then finally, as I mentioned earlier, the prison visits. I would encourage people, okay, many of you have been into prisons, and you may have friends and people in your network who don't want to, they're not looking to get involved in prison ministry in the Colby network. Get them signed up for a prison visit to ensure that they have a greater understanding of who people are when they come home from prison. What we generally see when people go on these prison visits, they come home and they recognize the shared humanity. Things that many of you have learned through Colby is that the people in prison aren't that much different from the rest of us. And finally, you know, this is a unusual ask, getting back to the material goods. Vehicles. If you have a vehicle to donate, or know of someone who has a vehicle, you can donate it to Parole Project, and we'll do a double transfer. You'll get the active donation from us, and then we'll donate it to a client who's in need, who's been working, saved up for their car insurance. Maybe they're taking public transportation to a job, but if they have their own vehicle, they could get this better job at this plant that's not on the public transportation route. There are many ways people can get involved and volunteer. Thank you for asking that.
Thank you, Andrew. I have questions for you. I understand will be the last question for this segment, so you'll have to give a great answer. I'll give you a chance to sort of wrap things up, if you will. But I really applaud your success and your initiative, particularly given your background. It would have been easy to kind of throw in the towel. But you've done something really special. So you showed us a recidivism rate of 40% overall, 22% I think is what the parole board achieved, and you're at 3. Okay, so can you kind of share for us, because it might be helpful for other state systems to think about, and I'm from Texas, how they might get from 22 to 3, you know, what maybe are those elements of the secret sauce. I know some of those are programs you provide, but if you had to say to the state, you should be doing the following without groups like mine having to step up to reach out to the, you know, not hundreds, but the thousands of people that are coming out on parole. Could you kind of speculate for that, what that would be?
Sure. So first and foremost, I will say that the asterisk by us is we obviously can choose who we take into our program. It's not a cherry pick. We're not taking the best 10%. We're pretty much not accepting 10%. We probably accept 90% of the people who reach out to us. We know what to screen for. So that being said, we're probably screening out some people who would go back to prison whether they were with us or not. But we are bringing down the recidivism rate, and it's because the breadth of resources that we pour in immediately. We start before they're released and start working with them and understanding their challenges. We don't try to get to know them or get to know what their struggles are, what sent them to prison after they're released. We know them, we get them from the prison. So a lot of people, you know, even people who've been sober, there are many people who may tell you, I haven't touched a drug since I've been in prison. And look, I know many of you may know there are drugs and alcohol in prisons. So people may say, I'm strong enough, I've been sober all this time, but they're going to contact new stressors when they come home that they didn't deal with in prison. So we're there to ensure that they're not going right back to that street, right back to that same friend group that are going to cause them to use, that's going to prevent them from having that first job interview, passing that first drug test. So it's almost like we're not giving them a choice. They're smothered by their friends who they did time with. We're able to show tough love in a way that, I've had 2 occasions that a parole officer's called me and said, you need to lighten up on this guy. They complained to their parole officer about me or one of my clients. But we don't give them a choice. Like we're that coach, we're that mentor that's on them, that's saying, no, we've been in your shoes, no excuses. And we're those training wheels. So 3, 6 months, 9 months later, they have a job they've earned, and they've gotten themselves so much further on a path than they would. Look, in a perfect system, unlimited resources, Parole Project would serve every person who comes home, and will probably drive recidivism from 40% to 25%, okay? What we're able to do, what we've proved is very committed resources. You know, our budget, what I would say is what we're spending on those individuals, their first, several months out of prison is saving taxpayers a few years worth of continued incarceration costs. So in short, my advice is what other states and what other systems could do is invest in immediate programming, immediate housing opportunities for people upon release, so people have a structure to go home to be successful. Thank you for that question. Thank you again for your time.